But I know in preparation for this episode, I mean, we were fretting it from the start, but what were your feelings? Why is spirituality such a difficult thing or uncomfortable thing to talk about?
It is. And I think we talked about this a little bit before the show, but I think for starters, when you have a conversation around spirituality, inherently you have to take a position, right? So I think it takes courage to do that because everybody agrees that eating bad foods is bad for your body. Everybody agrees that like taking care of your mental health is important. When it comes to spirituality,
I was giving a basic one. The sun is yellow.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. With spirituality, it's so convoluted and it's so different and it's so it's meaningful to everybody, right? Like it's a very individual experience. And so I think by you and I having to take a position, it makes it a difficult conversation to have.
Welcome to the On the Path podcast, a conversation on navigating life. Join Chris Coker and Colin Creech as they have honest conversations with fellow travelers on the path. In each episode, they explore the physical, mental, and spiritual health aspects of the whole self, striving for personal accountability and a strong community. Gain insights, learn from our mistakes, and hear from guests who have mastered these areas. Step on the path, embracing every challenge and success along the way. See you on the path.
We're back.
We
Which
are
one
back.
is this? This is number 3.
Yes, sir. Yeah. Good. You can count. We got there. I can only get to 2, but that was
Colin,
so
what are we talking about today?
Well, now I feel bad. So we are on the third segment of deep diving our whole self philosophy.
That's right.
The first 2 episodes were on our tenets, physical and mental, and this week is spiritual. And remaining will be personal accountability and a strong community. But I know in preparation for this episode, I mean, we were fretting it from the start. But what were your feelings? Why is spirituality such a difficult thing or uncomfortable thing to talk about?
It is. And I think we talked about this a little bit before the show, but I think for starters, when you have a conversation around spirituality, inherently you have to take a position, right? So I think it takes courage to do that because everybody agrees that eating bad foods is bad for your body. Everybody agrees that like taking care of your mental health is important. When it comes to spirituality,
I was giving a basic one. The sun is yellow.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. With spirituality, it's so convoluted and it's so different and it's so it's meaningful to everybody, right? Like it's a very individual experience. And so I think by you and I having to take a position, it makes it a difficult conversation to have. I think it's also the most difficult one to put to words, right? So these past few episodes, what we're doing is taking an original definition, which I'll cover here in a second, and then we're trying to reshape, well, what do you and I mean when we say spiritual well-being? What does that mean to us? And then obviously those are the kinds of conversations that we're going to have with people that come on to the show. So I think there's a lot riding on that as a concept. So admittedly, this has been, for me, I don't know about you, but for me, this has been the most difficult one to prepare for.
It was a rough night of sleep because I intentionally wanted to do some reflection and obviously we talked and we have to dig deeper here and we have to have a stronger stance because that's the whole point of this show. But thinking about why is it so difficult, I think there's also stigmas, right, of this religious group or this belief is attached to this and it's become politicized and it takes away what we're really trying to understand for ourselves and everybody's individual journey.
Yeah.
We've even deep dove, is this the right tenet, spiritual versus we talked about morals and other things. And I know the conversation's going to always be ongoing as we're refining, but this was, I'm a little sleep deprived in a good way, but it was a healthy, uncomfortable, I would say, just thinking it through.
Yeah. I agree.
Yeah.
And I think there's a good opportunity. I'm also excited, anxious, yes, just like you, but also excited to have the conversation because in the spirit of, the past few episodes we've had in this mini series, it's about growth, and it's about us getting better, and it's about us just taking a second to see where are we on the path, because in 2025 we want to continue to just walk confidently on that path. So I think it's a good opportunity. So with that, let's dive into where did we start? We have it pulled up. Do you want me to read through the original definition?
Please, by all means.
Okay, let me see. So I have it right here. Seeking a purposeful life through introspection on a deeper connection between the self and a higher power. So let's start there. Let me ask you, Colin, what are the pieces of that original definition that you like? What are the pieces that still resonate as true for you today?
Well, to start off, a lot of this exercise has been we have to give more clarity and more, we'll just keep using clarity, but it just needs to be more defined. It needs to have potentially more action oriented, or how do we start, deeper diving these tenets? I think what was missing, right, is obviously the clarity, but what was good is there is a connection, I think, to purpose and spirituality, very much so. To me, there is a connection, because of obviously your purpose may be for that higher power if you believe in God, but also maybe not, but it still has to do with maybe some morals or values or aspect that's driving your purpose. I know we've got Dr. Britt coming on again to really help us understand, like, how do we start defining that to help us continue to refine it, but us others. But to me, purpose is in there at a very high level.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think, actually just a thought I'm having right now, the proverbial, like, what is the meaning of life is obviously a spiritual question.
That's what I was battling with at 2 a.m.
Exactly. And I think talking about purpose is it's a more palatable way to have that discussion. Because when you talk about purpose, what you're getting at is, what is the meaning of my life, right? That's what purpose is all about. So I definitely agree with you that is purpose is a spiritual concept in a way. So I think that is a good thing. I also think that this idea of connection is one. So this is an interesting parlay into, one of the other tenets that we'll talk about in an upcoming episode on community, right? Like this idea of connecting. Community, we're typically talking about, the secular and worldly view of connecting with other people. I think spirituality is where we're connecting just more broadly with the world around us, with nature, with energy, like with potentially a higher power. But I would say that's actually an area where I would challenge, because I think that the idea of a higher power, now we're flirting more with religion than we are spirituality. Because I think, some of the things we've learned over the years, Colin, is there are very spiritual people who don't necessarily believe in a higher power, where they just, this concept of energy or aura, or, just the way that they interact with the world. You can be spiritual without being religious. And I think that is one piece. This idea of a higher power falls more into the religious category. Religious people are absolutely spiritual. It might be a higher power, but this idea of connection may not be. It doesn't have to be a higher power. And I think that's what makes spirituality a little bit more broad. But hopefully that also is, like, I guess, a deeper idea than what we originally had.
I had you saw my notes before the show, but I took a lot of notes. But one of the key things that you just said was spirituality is deeply personal and can vary widely from person to person. It doesn't necessarily have to be tied to religion. Many people identify as spiritual without being religious. Something else you said, and that's where I was also like, what do my favorite authors say about this? And it was Viktor Frankl, who said, ultimately, man should not ask what the meaning of his life is, but rather must recognize that it is he who is asked. And I think that goes to, it's super personal. And if you're looking for outside influences to answer that question for you, it's not going to be you making it your own, because I think that's where we've been thinking in preparation for this episode, is we have to really define this more for ourselves, and it has to be, we have to believe it. It has to be true for us, whatever it may be. So I think it's a very personal thing, obviously, but can differ depending on the person. That was, again, a very deep conversation that I ended with a very high level answer. So let's critique this now. Let's critique our original definition. So again, as you said, the original definition was seeking a purposeful life through introspection and a deeper connection between the self and a higher power. So we talked about, we liked these certain aspects, but what's missing? What could improve?
What could improve? So let's hang on the introspection word for a second. I don't think introspection is what defines spirituality. I think introspection is a prerequisite to be able to define it. Like, we're introspecting right now on exactly what it might be. But I don't think it necessarily has to be a part of the definition. So let's think about that for a second. The connection piece, for sure. Purpose, for sure. I think higher power, I think as we think about how we segment that out, like a religious person, right? Like when we say higher power, a significant majority of people listening probably go to God or a God. Yes, like in the concept of a religious conversation, it absolutely might be God. And there are people who follow religion, Christianity, Catholicism. They may believe in a God. They do if they follow those religions. Doesn't necessarily mean they're spiritual. Spiritual to me then becomes, where you said it, Colin, a personal and individual experience. You can have somebody who identifies as a religious person who says they're Catholic but doesn't go to Catholic church, or says they're Christian but doesn't ever step into a Christian church. So it doesn't necessarily make them spiritual. They might be religious, but they're not spiritual. Religion is kind of a prescription that you receive, and you're being told what is and what isn't. The spirituality piece is how you interact with what you're being told. That's where that individual concept comes into play. And that's why I think it's important that we spend some time talking about this, that spirituality is a more broad concept, but it's uniquely personal because it inherently requires accountability. You have to look into it. You have to introspect, and you have to decide, because ultimately you're going to be the only one who can help you solve, like, what does purpose look like in your life?
Are you saying talk the talk versus walk the walk? Because I think a lot of people do identify and do these actions, but are they actually, do they believe it? Are they doing it because that's what their community is doing? Or are they doing it because it's something that is foundational for them from a spiritual aspect? Well said. You said before the podcast that you were feeling a little foggy today, but I believe that is not true based off this conversation. So I think for me, it doesn't, this podcast is On the Path Podcast, a conversation on navigating life. There is a part of this that is fundamental to navigating life. And again, kind of that action aspect of things that I think is tied to purpose. So I think that's where my critique would be on the previous definition.
Yeah.
I know we were trying to spare the audience and do a little prep on what could be the new definition. And so what we quickly came up with, taking into account what was good, what was missing, was cultivating spiritual well-being through introspection, connection, and alignment with a higher power, personal values, and or the greater world around us. This journey involves seeking purpose, fostering inner peace, and embracing practices that deepen self-awareness and clarity to navigate life with intention and meaning. What's the vibe?
I think it's a good jumping off point. I think that it's a good place to start. It already captures, like, it's not necessarily a higher power, because again, some of this is just semantics, right? It's like, what do the words mean? And I think what you and I are talking about, Colin, is spirituality doesn't necessarily have to hinge on a belief in a higher power or not. It might be just a belief on our place in the broader world. To some people, that could be a higher power. To other people, it might just be the transference of energy and how that interacts with the world. So I think that's a good add to capture, I think, more inclusively this idea of spirituality. It's more than just religion. And I think that's a big step up by including more than just higher power. It's more broad than that.
I guess that's where maybe we're talking again. We said higher power, personal values, and or the greater world around us. It feels like the greater world around us is trying to hint at what you're saying, but missing the mark a little bit. Let's pick at the greater world around us, because that seems too vague in a way, and maybe it could play in the community space. So
I agree. Well, how about this? One of the things we talked about beforehand was actually on one of the things, like, is somebody with a spiritual person has the ability to believe in something without necessarily seeing in something. Like, I think that is a spiritual concept, right? So this idea of the greater world around us, that could be like, you know, you and I were talking about energy, and I was talking about like, you know, positive energy or negative energy. Like, I genuinely believe that if I pour positive energy out into the world, it's going to come back. Like, it is, think of it almost like a cup, right? Like, energy really does exist in the world. And if I pour positive energy into the world, I'm going to fill that cup up with positive energy. If I pour negative energy into the world, I'm going to fill it with negative. I genuinely believe that. That to me is a spiritual concept, because I can't see that. I can't see positivity in the world. Not really the same way that, you know, we can't see our soul when we die. So I think that to me is what they're getting at with the greater world around us. So I think it's more about believing without seeing is spirituality.
So what you're saying, there is a connection with like manifesting, right? And I used our friend ChatGPT, and it was I wanted to understand, like, does it fit into it from the current definition we just updated. And it says it fits well into the concept of spiritual well-being, as it aligns with themes like introspection, connection, and purpose. It involves focusing energy, intentions, and actions to bring desired outcomes into reality. I wonder, to me, it maybe is where we need to switch out the greater world around us. I'm just trying to think what is the few words that capture what you're saying.
Cultivating spiritual well-being through introspection and connection. I think some of it is, I think there's too many words. Like, that to me is already closer to the truth. Like, cultivating spiritual well-being through introspection and connection, period. Now, because the definition that you read through, with alignment to a higher power, personal value, and or greater world around us, like, we're already putting a box around what spirituality could be to somebody else. But I think what we're saying is it is ultimately about introspecting ourselves on you know, what right looks like. And then this idea of connection to something. Like, do you feel connected to the energy that I was talking about? Do you feel connected to God? Do you feel connected to the aliens we haven't discovered yet? Like, it could go in
don't make me go down that rabbit hole.
I'll talk all day. That's a whole other episode. But I wonder if that's it,
it's
Colin.
Not part of my spirituality necessarily, but
but is it, like, what do you think about that? Like, is it just simply like spiritual well-being is cultivated through introspection and connecting outside ourselves?
I'm gonna make a tweak and see if it works.
We'll edit out this dead silence.
No, we won't. Everyone. We don't edit. Okay.
Where'd you land?
That's just, I edit. So you're trying to just create more work for me outside of the show. Here we go. Wow. Well, I don't love it. I'm thinking something bigger than ourselves, which it depends on you. But if you're talking about higher power, to me, that means God, or you're talking bigger than yourself. You're talking about the broader world around you. You're talking about how you're interacting with it. So if you approach it from cultivating spiritual well-being through introspection, connection, and alignment with a higher power, personal values, or something bigger than ourselves, it just still feels like it's not. It's
so
like,
here, let's
it's not capturing what you were saying.
So here's a thought. Let's think of it. Let's take a different angle. So we did physical 2 weeks ago, mental last week. We got spiritual now. Physical and mental are, I think everybody would agree, this is really like it's an internal thing, right? Like we were talking about inside of ourselves, our physicality or our mental state. We're talking inside of ourselves. I think spirituality is out of body. And this is something I think, based on what we're talking about, Colin, I would go so far as to say, and anybody listening or watching could absolutely challenge me on this. I would love to hear from you. I think spirituality is out of body. It's more than just inside. Physical and mental is only inside. Spirituality is outside of oneself. So I think it's that cultivating spiritual well-being through introspection and connecting beyond ourselves or outside of ourselves, because then it leaves it very open-ended on what we're connecting to. But what I guess the key message I'm trying to pull through here is this idea of taking the time to reflect and understand where we as people connect outside of our own body.
Okay, I've got two options for you. I like what that actually helped me. I'm thinking beyond the self or greater than ourselves.
Beyond
the
oneself.
self.
Beyond
the self.
Yeah, beyond or oneself, beyond, like cultivating spiritual well-being through introspection and connection beyond oneself. I think it's that, because greater is, I think, a word that we should keep out of the vernacular for this definition, because I think that naturally draws us to one conclusion that maybe not everybody agrees to. So I think it's more just this universal understanding that it has to be beyond oneself.
Yeah.
So I think so let's put a pin in that
see
piece
here.
and let's hit on the other.
Yeah. Okay. So second part, this journey involves seeking purpose, fostering inner peace, and embracing practices that deepen self-awareness and clarity to navigate life with intention and meaning. I'm thinking about removing fostering inner peace, because I'm not sure if that's necessarily a goal. It sounds amazing, but this podcast is, about navigating life, pros and cons. It doesn't always mean there's peace, or maybe you believe something that it doesn't bring you peace, but you truly believe it.
Yeah.
So I wonder if we just remove that, and it's the journey involves seeking purpose and embracing practices.
I would say you could even cut that second piece. Like, what if it's this journey involves seeking purpose and deepening self-awareness to navigate life with intention and meaning? Like, I think it's really about the purpose is key.
Well, I think I like the action part of embracing practices, because I still feel like it needs to have that. You have to be doing something, or there's an action with that, whatever those practices are. Yeah.
Okay. I think that's I like that. So involves seeking purpose, and is it embracing practices though? Because like, I don't want it to read like we're basically saying like there is a script for what practices you should be embracing, right? Like embracing in my brain, it implies that they already exist. Like I would encourage people, like, do it's a personal and individual experience. So what does that what does that look like in your own life? It might simply be self-reflection or introspection. It might be reading certain books, or it might be going to church. It might be talking to a friend or joining clubs. Like, the practices are for somebody to choose.
Maybe yeah, I see what you're saying. Yeah, actually, again, well said. Are you sure you're foggy today?
This is pretty raw for everybody. This is a very much of the three, Colin. This is the most like workshoppy we've gone, where we're really we are building this in flight for all the world to see.
I think where it's getting tricky is, and this is where I'm excited we're having Dr. Britt back on, because this journey involves seeking purpose. Do they have to be connected? I actually don't know, right? Is your purpose always connected to spirituality? I don't know the answer. Do you? Do you have a perspective?
I mean, I don't know. I don't know if there is an answer. I don't think there's a right or wrong here. My gut would say yes, because but where I'm coming from the position of like purpose is greater than me, right? Like, so therefore, if it's beyond just myself, then it must inherently be spiritual in nature. So I would say yes, but it's a fair point. Like where do these things connect?
Okay.
And if they don't, how do we seek to connect to them? Because that to me is an important part. Like for us to be firing on all cylinders, we should be finding synergies wherever we can, because that's just going to make it easier.
Who knew the path would require this much, intentional reflection? It is because obviously this is important. We should think about what do these things mean to us: physical, mental, spiritual, strong community, and personal accountability. I
pulled a blank.
Almost lost it there. Almost. But so let me read the whole thing, but I'm leaving some of the first parts. I want to get your opinion. Cultivating spiritual well-being through introspection, connection, and alignment with the higher power, personal values, and or beyond the self. This journey involves seeking purpose that deepens self-awareness and clarity to navigate life with intention and meaning. Because I don't know how some people, and I'm not trying to make it a catch-all. I believe in God, but beyond the self, maybe people are thinking about their soul, and that's not outside, it's inside. I don't know. Just thinking out loud.
Both, right?
Yeah.
The very idea of a soul, like you said you believe in God.
Somewhere.
So for one, from like to take a Christian perspective for a second, the idea of a soul and believing in God, that would imply that typically to a Christian, like you're just borrowing this, bag of bones, right? Like, is this just a body? It is not me. My soul is me. And when I have expired this body that I'm in, my soul will go to heaven, right? That's kind of the idea. So I would say that soul, I think it is. I think it's too wordy. I think it's simply cultivating spiritual well-being through introspection and connection beyond oneself, period. I think that's it for the first half, because then it leaves it open-ended.
I'm going to respectfully disagree. I like the cultivating spiritual well-being through introspection with the higher power, personal values, and or beyond the self. And again, it's trying to define spirituality. I think for some, it's a higher power. For some, it's if you're an atheist, my personal values, like how do I live my life? And then for others, into what you were also saying, or beyond the self. I feel like it's giving enough clarity, but also not being too vague as well. But that's where I did remove the other words. So just cultivating spiritual well-being through introspection with the higher power, personal values, and or beyond the self. This journey involves seeking purpose that deepens self-awareness and clarity to navigating life with intention and meaning? Question mark at the end. I'm Ron Burgundy. What was the last? How are we tweaking that last sentence?
Drop the take the newest version that you have and put it in the chat so I can look at. I'm like recalling from memory now as you read it. If you have the,
you're impressive.
Seeking purpose.
This journey involves
seeking purpose that deepens self-awareness and clarity to navigate life with intention. I would say this journey,
maybe navigating life and intentionally navigating life,
involves seeking purpose. This journey involves seeking purpose and deepening self-awareness
to navigate life. I think we just removed the clarity part because it's not necessarily always going to be clear. Perhaps it gives you that firm basis to your point, taking a stance to do it. But I like the thought of it's more, the self-awareness aspect of it.
Yeah.
So
this journey involves seeking purpose to navigate life
with intention and meaning.
Yeah. Yeah. I think yes. Like, I think there are a lot of extra words in there.
Okay.
All right. So cultivating spiritual well-being.
Shoot it back to us. Go ahead.
Cultivating spiritual well-being through introspection with a higher power. I don't think it's introspection with a higher power. I think it's connection to a higher power. Like introspection would be everybody. So I would say cultivating spiritual well-being through connecting with a higher power or connecting to a higher power, personal values, and or beyond the self. I think connection is a key word there. I would swap out connection and introspection. So cultivating spiritual well-being through connecting to a higher power, personal values, and or beyond the self.
Is it by connecting versus through?
By connecting. Yes, it is.
Okay. I feel good about this.
All right, everybody.
Let's give it your confident Chris
Yes.
with let's do it. Let's see how this goes.
Thank you for the patience, everybody, as we stumble our way through this. That is the point. All right, so where we landed, Colin, cultivating spiritual well-being by connecting to a higher power, personal values, and or beyond the self. This journey involves seeking purpose that deepens self-awareness to navigate life with intention and meaning. That's pretty dang good, dude. That's pretty dang good.
It is. I'm excited from a year from now to see how we approach it again, because
yes,
it is pretty dang good.
You know what it is? Again, it's clear. I think it's clear, and one of the things that I like is this is a more true definition than I think we had before. Right. Like, you know, even I'm just going to call it out here, like for everybody listening, like that was a first for me, Colin, where you have in the conversation, you said, okay, well, higher power has to be there because I believe in God. That's you taking a position. The conversation that you and I had was, I'm struggling with higher power because is that even the thing? Like we're not really sure that is what it is. So I think this inherently is way more aligned to who you and I are. So I guess for everybody listening, that's an important piece here is like Colin and I built this definition. Yet this is a wildly individual thing to everyone. So if ever there was a tenet that we would love your feedback on, it's probably this one. I'd love for folks to weigh in on this. And I think, Colin, something that I'd love to achieve in 2025 is being deliberate about having guests to talk about this. Because I think it's very broad and I think it would give us an opportunity to learn, and hopefully we will be able to refine the definition, right? The idea isn't to be stagnant. So
I couldn't agree more. So let me end this with a quote that I think really captures your personal beliefs, but also others. And it's from Tecumseh, a Shawnee leader and warrior. He said, "So live your life that the fear of death can never enter your heart. Trouble no one about their religion, respect others and their views, and demand that they respect yours."
Yeah, I like that a lot. I, in particular, like that last piece. Like, I think it's important to stand up for ourselves. That's a key piece. Everybody's very much about like the internal aspect. And I agree, like be kind to your neighbor. I think it's okay to demand kindness back. And I'm not saying that we should like throw a tantrum, or we're not trying to convince people to believe in everything that we believe. That's not what I'm saying, but have the conviction to like stand up for yourself, stand up for what you believe in, and stand up for what you know to be your truth. So anyway, with that, I think this is a good one, Colin. I actually learned a lot. This is a great episode.
I did too. I really appreciate it. This was one that we probably put a lot more thought into, but also know it is a very personal thing, but also it is a very sometimes tricky thing to navigate in the world we live in. And I like that we're just trying to clarify how it's defined, but also then that also makes us have to do a lot more work for ourselves on what we believe and how we think of spirituality. So
agreed.
With that,
well done, my friend. Well done.
I thought you were going to end it. There we go.
See you on the path.
I'll see you on the path.